Okay, guys, can you hear me? My presentation. All right. Okay, thanks. So today we're going to be talking about publishing in open access journals. Um, well, thank you for this presentation or this opportunity to present on this during Open Access Week 2023. Um, so this is just an option on publishing. Perhaps we know that we usually publish in closed journals, journals where you need to pay to be able to publish, journals where you also need to pay to be able to read. But during open access week this year, we want to also highlight that there is an option to publish in open access journals. So my presentation will talk about what open access publishing is. We'll also talk about the benefits of open access publishing. We'll discuss the publishing process in open access journals. We'll also talk about how to find and evaluate open access journals. And we will also talk about the open access initiatives or platforms that are available, and we'll touch a bit on the ethical considerations in open access publishing. So, what is open access publishing? One definition is that it refers to the practice of making scholarly research freely available to the public without restrictions on access or use. So basically, we want to make research freely available, the information, so that readers can read without any challenges of or having to pay, or challenges of um, having to download, challenges of access really. And it's in contrast to the conventional subscription model where readers must pay for access to scholarly content. So, and this is typically through libraries. And definition from the Berlin Declaration of Open Access Knowledge in the Sciences and Humanities says that open access, by open access to the literature, we mean that it's free availability on the public internet, permitting any user to read, download, copy, distribute, print, search, or link to the full text of these articles, crawl them for indexing, pass them as data to software, or use them for any other lawful purpose without financial, legal, or technical barriers other than those inseparable from gaining access to the internet itself. So basically, we are trying to make research or scholarly information free to the reader. Okay. So, what are the benefits of open access publishing? Number one, it increases the visibility and impact of your research. Um, when we publish in open access journals, we make our research be able to reach a broader audience, including other researchers or policymakers who may need it, and the general public. And open access articles are also more likely to be cited, which leads to an increased visibility and impact of the research. So we think about yeah. So unlike if you are publishing in closed journals, like for example Elsevier or IEEE, for example. And if it's closed access, it means that any reader who might find an article that is interesting, they need to face that barrier of having to pay to be able to gain access. But um, when you publish your work through open access options, then it means that your research then is able to have a broader audience, and any person or who might be interested and who find your work useful will have access to it. It also enhances collaboration and networking. And uh, this means also that as your work is easily available to others, they are able also to then collaborate or seek collaboration with you, or and it also then creates opportunities to network with other researchers from other parts of the world or even regionally. Okay. It also enhances accessibility and societal impact. Um, Again, that issue of uh, it being freely available to everyone without people having to pay for it. And it contributes to the democratization of knowledge, enabling greater societal impacts. Okay. And yeah, so I just want to give an example. For example, I think there's a researcher on in is it at UCT. This person is a specialist in ear and nose, um, like ear and nose um, surgeries. And what he has been able to do, perhaps there are also very few people who are able to do this. What he has been able to do was to create an open access book, which he has made available freely on through the open access publishing platforms that UCT uses. And this has enabled doctors in other parts of the world to also access this knowledge on how to do operations on ear and nose, like surgeries. So that's part of the societal impact. It has more than 1 million downloads ever since it was published. So this is just an example of what open access publishing can do for society if we allow that information to go out there and not make readers pay. And then there's also preservation and long term availability. With open access publishing, the journals are seeking to be published in using technology that will enhance the like the digital preservation, ensuring long-term availability and accessibility of published research. So the digital repositories and platforms that I use, these can be preserved for future generations, ensuring that there's ongoing impact and relevance of the research. So we're not just putting our research out there so that whoever decides to put it down will put it down, but we're putting our work in institutional repositories or journal platforms that are going to be there and will ensure perpetuity in access. And then there's also rapid dissemination and early feedback of your work. So with open access publishing, you don't need to. So for some of the platforms, you can actually publish for free, which allows that your work is rapidly disseminated, and you with some journals, for example, they don't need to wait until you've got 8 articles for them to be published. Sometimes they are published as the research is made available. An article is already placed in a is already published. So with open access publishing, you also allow for your research to go out there as soon as it's ready, and it enables immediate access to the latest research, and it also then allows for others to give you feedback, for other researchers to then give you feedback on what you would have written, which promotes dialogue, also collaboration, which we talked about earlier, and it also gives opportunities to improve and give further exploration of research ideas. Okay, are we still together? I'm not able to see if you are still online, but are we hearing each other? Melissa, please, can you confirm that? Okay. All right. And then another benefit of open access publishing, it allows for compliance with funding mandates. So you find that increasingly institutions of research, institutions that will fund your research may require that you publish your work open access. So these avenues of open access publishing ensures that you comply with requirements of organizations that may fund you. It could be your university, it could be a research organization that you've approached to help you with your research project. So by publishing in open access journals, researchers ensure compliance with these mandates or requirements, which can lead to increased funding opportunities and support for your future work. Then another benefit of open access publishing is that it allows for data sharing and reproducibility. Um, as with open access journals, you also find that you'll be required to share the data that you've used to come up with your paper or your publication, which promotes transparency and enables the reproducibility of your research. And open access articles may also include supplementary materials, data sets that you would have used, or code, allowing for other researchers to validate and build upon published findings. And this collaborative approach fosters um, co- scientific rigor and advances knowledge in the respective fields. Okay, so those are the benefits of publishing in open access journals. Now we are moving on to the process of of publishing open access journals. So it's not very different from publishing in like traditional journals. Uh, First of all, you need to select the open access journal that you want to publish in. So here you are, a researcher, maybe you're doing your MPhil, maybe you're doing your PhD, or maybe you're a lecturer and you are also required to publish for your own professional development. And the first thing you need to do, um, obviously, before you write the paper, you also need to know which journal you're going to publish in. So let's say I find, um, let's say I want to publish an article about climate change, for example. I need to select an open access journal related to the subject I'm writing about. So that's the first part that we do. You select the journal that you want to publish in, and just make sure that journal is not a predatory one. You obviously need to select it from reliable sources. If it's open access, we are probably going to think about places like Directory of Open Access Journals, where you can also select relevant journals, particularly to the subject that you're writing about. We'll talk about how to select or evaluate journals before you decide to publish in them shortly. So that's the first part. And then you move on to review the journal guidelines. So before you write, it's advisable that when you've decided that you want to publish in Journal of Climate Change, for example, go to the guidelines and review the requirements of of writing in that journal. So um, those journals will give you guidelines maybe on writing style. Some may even give you a template on how to write. Uh, Maybe the referencing style to be able to use in that particular journal. So you need to know this before you actually start the writing process. Then you move on to preparing your manuscript. You now do the writing. Now you know what the journal is expecting for you to write, how the journal is expecting you to write a particular article. Then you move on to do the writing. And once you've done the once you've prepared and finished the manuscript, you also need to address ethical issues, just like when you're doing like your dissertation, there are ethical considerations to be addressed. Uh, Obviously, things like plagiarism, things like how you got your data, consent of how you got your data, etc. And then you move on. After you've addressed those, you then move on to submit your article to the journal using the guidelines on how to submit for that particular journal. And then the journal will obviously take that paper through a peer review process. And once they've reviewed, and they may give you revisions and ask you to resubmit, or at this point perhaps it's either you know that your paper will be reviewed or will be rejected. But if you're asked to revise, then you revise, you make the revisions, and then you resubmit to the journal. After this, you then move, then the editor will decide whether to accept the publication or not. And if it's accepted, the next stage obviously is that your paper is due for publication. And it's also at this stage, depending on the organization, you may be asked, or depending on the journal, you may be asked to then pay article processing charges, which are usually known as APCs. And we'll also talk about the other options for journals that going around this issue of article processing charges, because I think it's also could be a barrier to publish. Um, but after you've paid your article processing charges, if you are required to do so, then the paper is published and made accessible to others for free. Okay. And then after it's made available, as the author, you also need to do some post publication promotion and engagement with others. Maybe then take your paper, discuss it at conferences, promote it on social media sites, and engage with other researchers that are interested in the particular topic that you would have written about. Okay, so that's the publishing process. Um, I will move on to alternative models for APCs in open access publishing. Um, so, as I was saying earlier, article processing charges may be a barrier for people to publish in open access, but there are ways which you can go around these. Um, so, there are some journals that give institutional memberships, which then allow for an institution to not have to pay for when they are publishing in that particular journal. Okay. So you need to find out if your institution subscribes to a particular journal that you may be interested in, and you could be able to publish in that particular journal for free. And then another model are what are known as author subsidies or waivers. And these are open access journals that may offer subsidies or waivers for authors who are unable to afford the article processing charges. And these subsidies can be based on factors such as the author's country of origin, affiliation with, for example, low income countries or financial needs. And if you notice there, I just highlighted an example, particularly for Zimbabwean authors, the EIFL list of journals with free or discounted article processing charges. So you, as an author from Zimbabwe, there are those options to publish for free or at a discounted price through that EIFL list. I think it's got about 2,000 journals, which you can actually be able to publish for free. So that's one way to go around not having to pay APCs. Then you can also get support from funding organizations that can also then support perhaps the research that you are carrying out. And then these pay your article processing charges on your behalf. And so you can apply for such funding if you come across it. Um, and then there's also crowdfunding or consortia, where consortium agreements or come together and then they support open access publishing initiatives, which the benefits of which are then um, given to researchers for researchers who belong to that consortium, for example. So those are the alternative ways you can go around the issue of not having to pay article processing charges when you are publishing in open access journals. Okay. Then moving on to how to find and evaluate open access journals. Where do we find these? Okay, because we don't want to just take the next open access journal that we've come across. Remember, it's the internet. Anybody can publish or come up with a journal that they want. But what we are seeking is to be able to publish in reputable journals that can also enhance your professional development. So, how do we find these? We find open access journals through journal indexing and databases. So, indexing databases we have, which are popular: Web of Science, Scopus, PubMed, the Directory of Open Access Journals. So in these databases, you can actually search to find if a particular journal is in one of these or on any of them. You can be sure that it has at least some good reputation, that the journal has met at least some standards, some quality standards, and has undergone some rigorous evaluation. So these are some of the places where you need to search to just to verify that where I'm publishing, will it will it enhance my professional development? For some, it also means promotion. Will it allow me to get promoted? Because for some institutions, when they are now evaluating your publications that you put on your profiles, they will go through these databases to see whether or not where you've published is actually a reputable place and it's not a predatory type of journal. Then the other uh, um, criteria you can use to evaluate open access journals are what are called impact factor or journal metrics. So you need to consider the journal's impact factor, and other metrics such as site score, the item factor, or other types of rankings that are available. These metrics, they provide an indication of the journal's influence and the average number of citations its articles receive. So many of these journals will have what is called an impact factor. And I think traditionally for researchers, this is what they have used to say, if I publish in such and such a journal, then it's a prestigious journal, and many people would want to have their work in that journal because it's of high reputation because of the high impact factor, for example. So, but however, we also need to keep in mind that impact factors should not be the sole determinant of a journal's quality, because you'll find that some of the open access journals that are coming up may not be as popular, but this is one criteria you can use to check whether an open access journal is a reputable one. Okay. And then the next one is consider also the editorial board and the review process of that particular journal. Um, so every journal should have an editorial board, and you need to also know that to to have an idea of the expertise of the editorial board on this particular journal. So if you're considering a journal, it's just important to maybe go and visit the about page of that journal, see the editorial board, the people that are there, and you can also do a check to see, are they experts in this particular area, and will my paper be reviewed by experts, for example. And reputable open access journals often have renowned researchers and experts in the field serving on the editorial boards. And also, you need to learn about the review process. Okay, it's important. Who are the people that are going to review? Is it my friends? That type of thing. Chances are, if it's going through a rigorous peer review process, then this journal will likely be reputable. Okay, so it needs to follow a rigorous and transparent review process for it to be a good journal. Then also consider the journal's policies and guidelines. And these policies could be on ethics, data sharing, conflicts of interest, publication standards. So, whatever policies that a journal is following, they need to be following clear guidelines, and they also need to be following ethical guidelines such as those outlined by the Committee on Publication Ethics. And there's also need to have well-defined policies for data availability and transparency. Then consider also the journal's reputation and history. Um, Reputable journals are often well established and have long-standing presence. They may have published influential research in the past and are recognized by researchers and professionals in your fields. So this could also be criteria in evaluating whether this is a good open access journal to put my work in. And another criteria is also recommendations and citations. Recommendations from your colleagues in the field, mentors, or experts in your area. Ask for their insights on reputable journals to publish in, and they can give you good advice. Or you can also see the citation patterns of the journal's articles. So you'll find that you find information on how like articles in a particular journal have been cited by other researchers. And that can also tell you whether a journal is a good one to publish in or not. Okay, and then the publisher's reputation is also another criteria you can use to decide whether or not an open access journal is a good one to publish in. So you need to research the reputation and credibility of the journal's publisher. Reputable open access publishers have transparent publishing practices, clear copyright policies, and a commitment to quality and integrity in scholarly publishing. So you need to check if the publisher is a member of recognized publishing organizations such as the OASPA, Open Access Scholarly Publishing Association, or the Committee on Publishing Ethics. Okay. Then you also need to be very careful of predatory journals. I think you've heard of these, but basically, predatory publishers are people who are out there to obviously make their own profit from your work. And if you're not careful, you can actually put your work in journals that can discredit you. Maybe you put in a lot of effort, but then you put them in a predatory journal. Someone is going to make money out of that, but you can lose out on promotion, for example, or um, your credibility as a researcher might be at stake. So, how can we avoid predatory journals? You can use such lists as Bill's list of predatory journals, although this has now been archived, it's still there. But you can also use the reputable platforms such as the director of open access journals to decide on where to publish or an open access journal to publish in. There's also a tool called Think, Check, and Submit that you can use, which just helps you to think about the journal that you are considering, and if you go through that think, check, submit tool, it can then help you to decide whether or not a particular journal is predatory or whether it's a good one in which to publish in. So think of that as well. Okay, so checking if a journal is indexed in reputable databases, we've already talked about that, but this is just a site, a page where I'm just listing the different tools that you can use. Web of Science, uh, there's the address there. You can actually create an account and then you can check whether a journal is indexed in there by the title of the journal or the ISSN number to see if it's included in the Web of Science core collection. There's also the Scopus database, and again, you can check for the journal's title, the ISN, SSN, or the publisher's detail to see if that journal is indexed in Scopus. There's the PubMed um, database. Again, that's the address. And you can use the search feature to search whether a journal is in that database or not. And then obviously the common one is the directory of open access journals. You find that, for example, if you are looking for Web of Science, for a database or for a journal in Web of Science, they also actually reference directory of open access journals there. So you can you can use this directory of open access journals to see if a journal is indexed there. Chances are, if you find the journal in any of these databases, they are high quality journals. It's a high quality journal. It has undergone a review process or rigorous checking or it has had to meet a certain criteria or quality standard to be able to be indexed in any one of these. Okay, so that's how you can check if a journal is a reputable one. Okay. You can also check the journal's website. I think we've talked about that, where you find information about where they are indexed, um, and where they have their abstracts. Okay, and then the journal databases themselves can also be sources of information about the journals which they publish. For example, we've already talked about Scopus, and then Clarivate also has journal citation reports. And then academic library databases are good sources of knowledge about good data or journals. For example, here at the library, we have a list of both subscription and open access journals, which you can also reference. And you can also contact the database provider if any of these work, but I'm sure those are different avenues where you can know that a journal is a reputable one or not. Then let's now talk about the platforms or the tools that you can use that are available for searching for open access journals. The obvious one, which I've been talking about, is Directory of Open Access Journals. It's a comprehensive directory of open access journals across a variety of disciplines. So researchers from any discipline can find at least one journal that is relevant to their subject area. We also have tools such as Base Search, which is a multidisciplinary search engine. It indexes academic resources, including open access journals, and it provides access to millions of documents from repositories, institutional archives throughout the world. We've already talked about Scopus and PubMed Central. There's also Google Scholar, which I'm sure most of us know. You can use this as well to search for open access journals, and you are able to select open access options under their availability. And then there's also a tool called Unpaywall, which is a browser extension that helps you to find legal open access versions of articles. Um, and also Core, which is a database of articles, theses, and data sets, which you can also use to search for open access journals. There is also a tool called Open Access Button, which also enables you to find freely available journals and journal articles. Okay, so coming to the conclusion of my presentation, um, we talked about the benefits of open access, which is that it increases research visibility and it promotes wider dissemination of research. It allows for greater accessibility of your work, and it gives you as a researcher opportunities to share your work freely and promotes collaboration. Ultimately, it helps you as a researcher to contribute to the advancement of knowledge and foster a more inclusive and equitable research ecosystem. Um, and I've also just highlighted the publishing resources for open access, again, mentioning the Director of Open Access Journal websites and the EIFL list of um, journals with negotiated article processing charges. And the last thing you can also do if you need assistance in this area You can also visit the library or talk to anyone from the library will be able to assist. Or I don't know if there are any questions at this point. Sorry?